Welcome to the Unsaid. The Unsaid is a conversation amongst four brothers, increasingly better and better friends, who are looking to talk about things that are often left unsaid, things that are more nuanced, that are intersectional, that are socially aware about our current state of the world, but through the lens of how four Black men see it. All of us are here and based in Chicago or the Chicagoland area, and we bring that perspective of being lifelong people who are committed to the work of social impact, but also to elevating the voices of Black men in the conversations that also should, would, and might often include us. So that said, I want to just say that this conversation today is to expand on a conversation we tried to start in our last episode, which is on allyship and this question of how particularly minoritized people, so as Black men, we hold particular degrees of minoritization. When I say minoritization, what I mean by that is that we have our own identities, we have our dopeness, we have our experiences, we have our points of excellence, but there is a world out here also that imposes itself upon all of those things. And so rather than saying, I don't like to say I'm some minority, that is a quantitative term about my representation and population in a community. However, I do know that we are minoritized. I don't think that I'm someone who is just marginal, but I know that there are many parts of my life that are being marginalized. And so I use that terminology, minoritized and marginalized, for a reason, to ensure that we still hold the power of our identities, our expressions, and our sense of self, while we separate ourselves from what has happened to us and not holding that as our only truth and identity. So where it comes to race, whether it comes to economics, class, these sorts of things, we use people first language here. And as Black men, I just want to also say that we cannot speak on behalf of every single minoritized group. We are coming to this conversation as individuals. We may have different perspectives on what allyship means. I'm going to get into a little bit of the timing of how sometimes allyship can be challenging. I think we're experiencing that a lot right now. We'll dig into it a little bit more. I want to give a special shout out because I saw somebody just hop on the line. My little brother Mahmoud. Right now he's in the West Bank, and he just hopped on a little bit earlier, and he just shouted a little "What's up?" So I just wanted to say, Mahmoud, brother, it's good to see you alive and well. I'm hoping that your father and mother and sister and the whole family are doing well over there in the region with all that is happening right now. Due to the war that Israel is waging on Hamas, and the war that has been waged on Palestinians for years and years by those in the area. So that said, brother, it's good to see you on the line. So first things first, y'all. I'd love to just get a high level. How do you define allyship for you?
Allyship, allyship for me is about living in community. It's about listening to the needs of others and seeing their needs as worthy as my own needs. Allyship sometimes requires inconvenient and uncomfortable decisions, but allyship should also be mutual. There should also be, it's not that we're keeping count. It's not that everything needs to be immediately reciprocated, but the feeling of allyship, the feeling of support, of advocacy should be a two-way street. And sometimes it's hard for me to tell who is an ally and who am I serving. Because at times it feels like, particularly as a Black person, when people talk about being in alliance with Black people, they think about Black people supporting their causes as opposed to supporting Black causes as vehemently as Black people support theirs. And now I try to act based on who I am as opposed to how people treat me. So no matter what group you're part of, I believe you deserve freedom and liberation and peace. And I'm going to advocate for that as much as possible. And one of the hard things for me is to see this go out and not see it come back as much towards the Black community and towards me as a person. So allyship to me, seeing the needs of others as being as worthy as my own needs and acting as if it is such, and it is a reciprocal street.
I'm really trying to think of first off, Jamal, that was a great answer, a great way to explain that. I think especially the point about like I'm not keeping track, and I think that's what we kind of hear a lot is like, well, I didn't see so and so doing this for me, so why would I do this for them? And I think we can get into a deeper conversation of that. But when I'm thinking of ally, I'm thinking of like for one, of course, a lot of people know I do, you know, advocacy for our community, but like I also been posting a lot about what's going on in Palestine. When I was an educator, I taught at a school that was primarily Hispanic. You know, I got involved in a lot of stuff that those are my students that were involved in. And even when I was in college, that was my first time seeing other struggles that were linked to ours. I think it's stepping outside of your box and understanding that you, like, as a human, you can't have tunnel vision if we're all going to be here together. Like, there's a common link behind all of this. You know, if we even get to the root of why racism was created, it was created, or race was created to create a divide between working class people to uphold capitalism and so-called white supremacy. So like, if we even get to the root of that, it makes no sense to even say that our struggle should be about themselves, because if I'm helping free you, metaphorically, I'm helping free myself. You know, I posted a video the other day about how universal health care, shout out to Tom Hartman, who talked about this on his radio show. Universal health care isn't a thing in this country because there have been some white folks in power who are so spiteful. They felt as if if they extended that to us, then that would help us live longer. And then, you know, great replacement theory, that whole, you know, thought process right there. But like, if white folks are saying that they're not going to fight for that, they're not also helping themselves at the same time. And because we categorize things in this country so much. It's either black or it's white. It's either this or it's that. It's either for black people or for white people. It's either man or it's for women. We don't understand that we're fighting for, like Malcolm said, for human rights. This is a human rights struggle. The ally word is just so loaded too, because I feel like it's been commercialized a lot, and I don't think people truly understand what it means. But it's almost like, if, you know, I look at humanity as a team. I don't look at it like we're opposing. And basketball season is back upon us. So like, if we're on the team, like, if my objective is to score 30 points a game, I'm missing out on the part where it says that we're supposed to win together. So the ally was, you know, Jordan and Pippen. It's like, we trying to win together. You know, if I'm great and you're not great, we ain't gonna win.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm gonna just close on this. When I speak to kids, I often use this analogy of talking about how, like, if you're in a position where you have to fight, like, you have to be able to ball up your fist completely. And if one of your fingers is hurt, no matter if it's the pinky, the thumb, whatever, like, that fist ain't gonna be as strong. So like, when we're talking about allyship, it's, even if I'm in a good condition, or even if I'm fighting for my own things, understanding that common link and bond is what actually frees us all. Because if they doing it to them, I mean, like, do we really have to relive all these Dr. King quotes again? It's like we talk about King and X, but then when it's time to act on what they actually talked about, then we say, oh, well, we can't. Malcolm X was the biggest supporter of this type of stuff. Dr. King said we're all tied in together. So to me, I mean, and I hope I broke that down well, because like, when you grow up and it seems like common sense to you, it's sometimes hard to articulate why others should care. But like, yo, we human, you know, and even if we get what we deserve in this country politically, and we will, because we'll fight, if other people don't, then it's not true justice, because they're gonna come for ours eventually then to take it back.
Definitely. I struggled with the question for a minute because I never use the term ally, ever. Never. It is never something that is used to describe ultimately what is reciprocity and comfort for me. And then when I changed the way I looked at it, I said, okay, well, if I don't use the term ally, what do I use? And I thought of, you know, the perfect way for it to make sense for me is a Venn diagram, right? And one circle is who's with me. And the other circle is who am I with? And I think that an ally, or what's, you know, reciprocated and what's comfortable, would have to be those people who are in both of those circles. And it's not always the same. I think that who's with us is not always who we're with. And I think the closer we get to that middle is about probably the closest we'll get to who we see as allies, or who we see as who we're with and who's with us. And for so many years, I struggled with not understanding why both of those groups weren't the same. And now we see a situation where it's playing out on a grand scale, and it's really calling into question who's with us and who we're with. And I am the most comfortable now because more people are uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is, there's a lot of things that you have to sacrifice to be with somebody. And there's a lot of things that they have to sacrifice to be with us. And I think that a lot of times we've seen so much sacrifice on our side, and to the point where we couldn't even begin to understand the sacrifice of anybody else. You know what I mean? And so, I'll just end it with, in that middle ground for me, that list is not long. It's quite short. And realizing that it kind of throws you into this existential crisis, because then you start to question how you've positioned yourself and who you've surrounded yourself with. But it does give you a sense of peace after a while, because now you kind of start to understand that, the things that you were judging people, by to be with you and for you to be with them is not really what you ultimately will when it comes to sustaining and kind of growing and kind of really creating something that is as big and as impactful as the evils of the world. So that's kind of where I'll stop.
Yeah.
Can I throw this in there too? I want to just acknowledge too that it's understandable why people, especially in our community, would feel as though they should not have to give their energy, because we have often been overlooked. We have often been on this, or felt as though we're on this island fighting, for ourselves. But I really want to challenge people to, reflect on that and attempt to move past that frustration, because although it seems is that way, it has never truly been that way in this country, that we're fighting alone. It's again often advertised that way. The issues we run into is we've always had people in various different groups who have fought with us. The problem is we have not always had people in positions of power politically that have fought with us. And that's the challenge we all face as people. And that's again what I'm proposing to, like, our, white brothers and sisters and anybody else out there. This is harming you too. Like this caste system, this economic system of capitalism, it's harming you too. Whenever you see studies that say black people are harmed, it's never 100%. It could be 90 something, but it's never 100%. Meaning that it's you are getting hurt too at the same time. So I understand the frustration, and I'll throw this. I was thinking of this as Dion was talking. It's like if there was a burglar in my neighborhood or in another subdivision, making his way down the block, robbing all these people, and these are people that I don't necessarily see as my friends, I guess, right? Like, so would I not care then? Am I just gonna worry about my home? Like, that dude is gonna rob everybody in my neighborhood. And if we don't try together to stop it, maybe I'll be the only one with something left, but then everybody else around me won't have anything. And then how they gonna look at me?
And that dude is a white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal.
You know what I'm saying? It's like if we know better than anybody. If they hate them, they gonna hate us.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like the new speaker of the house, bro. Like if they hate them, he ain't gonna be like, nah, I just don't hate them, but I love you. Come on, we know how this go.
And recognizing, you think about like the migrant crisis in the city of Chicago, I think it's really easy to break this down by race and color and nationality, because of the visceral nature of seeing the funds come in immediately. I think the recognition that the common enemy that we need to address in this case is white supremacy, that we have a manufactured crisis in this city, manufactured by white supremacist governors and a white supremacist system, and the policies that we have abroad that have led these people here, manufactured by the fact that we don't want to provide people housing, that we ignored the cause of black folks to say that we need to build permanent housing in our city for so long, manufactured by that callousness. If we stop thinking about this as a Black people and migrants issue and start thinking about it as a white supremacist issue, I think we're going to come from long-term solutions to a problem that shouldn't even exist in the first
Facts.
Yeah, for me, I think allyship is, let me just speak more broadly. So there's allyship and camaraderie, friendship, these sorts of things. And then there's the issues, right? The ways that you can show up, the actions and such. So I'm not going to be dealing with the issues of the actions. I'm just talking about the concept. And I think one of the ways I want to talk about the concept of allyship in this moment is the challenges and the ways in which people are breaking ranks with one another because of the felt sense of a lack of allyship right now. For those who are watching who are not in Chicago, what Jamal was talking about as relates to the migrant crisis, and perhaps those who are not in the United States, though I'm sure that this is something anyone can understand because this is an issue of borders. Borders, I would just want to remind folks, are manufactured lines in the sand. There are thousands and thousands of persons coming into the United States through the southern border. Many of them, if you understand anything about geopolitical and sociological history of America, I believe are coming because of the practices that America has produced and the gains that we have experienced, particularly since the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement went into place in the early 90s that robbed Central and South America of much of its economic power. The ways in which we've instigated coups throughout South America and Central America over the last 4 decades that has now led to this deluge of thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people fleeing north. And we have to remind ourselves that they are fleeing, not just migrants, and constitute what they are fleeing, not in their country, but in our country. And this goes back to the point that the brothers were making around the topics of what we're fighting when they talk about like hypercapitalism and white supremacy and such, those same things, as well as I'm going to add militarism, a global penchant for militarism predominantly focused on Black and brown countries. And I say that with a matter of truth behind it, because if you all can tell me what 5 majority white countries around the world the U.S. has sold or dropped bombs in the last 15 years, I'm all ears. But I can point to over a dozen Black or brown countries where we do that. So the direction of our militarization is often in the direction of a not only a hyper-capitalist, but also a white supremacist function. The next thing I'll say is that I think allyship is a challenging thing for minoritized persons because it can feel as if we're being asked to do more when we haven't even received enough. And to be asked to do more in a moment of not receiving enough can feel like a slap in the face. And oftentimes it can feel as if we're being asked to trade the work, time, and the limited capacity that we have to extend towards our own liberation and our own peace in a moment for someone else. And we wonder then, would they do it for us? And we look back historically, and this is where I think Ernest is really powerful in this point. If you know your history, you know that the others have been there for us. There have been many. Now, the question of people in power being there for us, that's different. Politicians being there for us, that's different. Business leaders being there for us, that's different. But the everyday person, we know for a fact Martin Luther King went hand in hand at the Poor People's Revolution. When he went north from the South to Chicago, it was because he was saying we need to bind the geography of the United States in an allyship circle to ensure that we are not just saying that these things of race exist in the South. That's why he split up. He said, hey, there are vitriolic injustices in the South, meaning that you can see somebody calling you the N-word. You can feel the slap on your face. You can hear somebody disrespecting your mama while she walked down the street in the South. In the North, he called it the creative injustice. He said, you go north and it's like written into the laws in some very creative ways. Everybody is what James Baldwin said, where he said the innocence constitutes the crime. It's like, yo, like people are walking away and they look innocent, but look at the way in which this this web of deception is put together, called laws, called standard best practices for business, that has this racially disparate effect on the people who don't even have a voice in the city council or in the boardrooms. That is very creative. It's the same thing I felt when I went to Israel. I'm like, yo, this is like wildly creative. Like walking through the West Bank, you can see just how creative the injustices and the oppression is to people who don't have hardly anything to fight with, fight back with, organize with, grow opportunities with. And so then as a Black person, I'm like, what is my responsibility here? Knowing that what I see as the tactics seem to be very similar as the ones that I've experienced in my country, in my life, within my race, within my community, but the people are of a different nationality. And does nationality matter when the tactics are the same? Right? And when I'm over here like doing his best, well, we're here trying to say like, hey, we're doing the best we can. Like Jamal's over there starting a nonprofit trying to raise money. Dion was just talking on Facebook about people trying to raise money and folks saying, well, you don't have any multi-year funders, so we can't fund you as a multi-year funder. And it's like a person trying to get a job and they're like, it takes 3 years job experience to get a job. And they're like, I know this is an entry-level job. Can I get some experience? Like this, like we're dealing with our own stuff. And then at the same time, we're being asked to give. And that requires us to really ask ourselves about this question of capacity and the breadth and the largeness, the possibility of the largeness of love that we have for others. To me, allyship is taking on the words or the actions of people who hold marginalized identities that you don't hold, who are in the ways that they are saying we should be doing it. So for instance, I know that folks are saying with the migrant crisis, like, yo, show up, let's do mutual aid, show up to the police stations, like bring food, bring clothes, speak up in city council meetings, send letters to your alderman. That's what folks are saying who are most affected by it. Like, that's how you can ally with us. On the other side, you've got folks, you know, in Gaza and in Palestine, it's like, hey, speak up, like, hey, witness for us, witness, like, you know, don't let our cries go silently. You know, I've been seeing pictures of my friends who, and you know, who are Israeli, who are living in Gaza. And I just want to be just shout this out because I think it's a point of importance. There are some far left-leaning Israelis that I've been finding out about who live in Gaza, who are sort of like the, y'all know, like the white dude that moves into the hood. Like, and he's like, yo, and then, but like 30 years later, he's still there. He done raised 3 white kids. Like, they go into the public school on the block. They know everybody. Like, and they got the respect of the Black folks around there. Like, that's similar to the ways in which, especially on the southern end towards the Egypt border, there's Israelis like that living in Gaza right now who are sort of living with the same stake and life on life that a lot of the Gazans are having. And it's another point of question to me of like, clearly they see allyship in there. You know, I talked to some of them, they're like, I have no loyalty to Netanyahu, I have no loyalty to the Knesset, I have loyalty to life and to these people because I think what my people are doing is wrong and I want to put my body in the middle of it. And I'm like, yo, that's a very interesting thing to think about because I've seen that here. Right? And I see them taking on a cost, but I also see a larger narrative that erases their contribution, right? And I see the same thing with like the white dude who moves into the hood, the Black person like myself. I've done a lot with like Latinos and like the Puerto Rican Liberation Front. Don't want no credit for it, but I'm also saying like, yo, you got to understand there's Black folks in there while you're saying like Black folks aren't showing up. So I'm gonna leave on that to make some space for some other brothers to jump in. But I'd love to talk about these 2 points of how we show up and what you all feel compelled to consider in light of 2 issues. One, the conversation of what is happening right now in the Holy Land, and then secondly, locally here in Chicago, the question of many Central and South American people fleeing north seeking asylum here in the U.S. and here in Chicago too.
You know, if we saw, to your point, if we saw what we did to those countries, I think our view would be different about them coming here. I don't, like, we see what's going on right now in Palestine. If they were a country this side, closer, I think the view would be differently if they came here. You understand what I'm saying? Like, the way in which, as a former educator, the ways in which we teach our courses, we don't focus on that. I tried so much in the 12 years I was in the class to put a dig into that American exceptionalism rhetoric and perspective that we were supposed to teach, you know, and even starting with 1776 or just speaking about the greatness of America and, you know, manifest destiny and an Indian Removal Act and all of this. Like, we don't hardly ever touch on foreign policy. We talk about, the World War, which really wasn't the world. It was just, the European countries in power. So like, if we were able to really see from that perspective, and it's something I have to educate myself on too, but I know we meddling. I did read Confessions of an Economic Hitman, so I know what we doing, and I know that folks ain't just risking their lives to come all the way up here for no reason at all.
Exactly.
So like that has to be an extension of our education, because also too with Palestine, like it just at a basic level, if you didn't have a heart to care, which I would hope you would, but on a basic level, it's like you giving your money for genocide. Then you know what I'm saying? Like then it's like, by seeing what's happening there and by seeing our elected leaders support that, you're also taking a step back in the past to see what was done to us and indigenous people here. And you're also able to see that if it happened again, they would support it still. Like that should trouble people. And that's what I get from it, because from afar, it's like the question is like, oh, what can I do from, being so far away, but also too, I'm learning, because as above, so below. So I'm seeing how you treat others. And that lets me know how you still treat me in a more discreet way and how it could happen. But my question that I'm thinking, if I'm just throwing this out there, but what does allyship actually look like? Because I see people saying, I ain't got time, I ain't supporting them, I ain't doing this and that. But then it's like, what does it actually mean? Because some people can say, free Palestine, it's a hashtag, that's it. Like it don't cost us nothing to say we support what you're going through. We want you to have freedom. I'm gonna keep organizing here for my people because we fighting too, but at the same time, I'm keeping you in my heart because I want you to have freedom too, and I'm gonna keep that in mind when the election comes up. You know what I'm saying? I think we quantify these things so much as like, we ain't saying go to a rally, put your body on the line, because we know you fighting. We know you got to go through a lot of your community. We know you struggling to get meals and for kids to get to school safely, and after school programs, this and that. So like, we get that, but it don't cost us nothing to make that link and say, I see you. I think, what I'm saying? Like, because what is allyship? Because we think everything about change means you going on the front line with a sign, getting beat up.
Well,
Because
I know Jamal got a jet real quick, so I want to just make a space. Jamal, if you need to jump in, go ahead.
And I really want to piggyback off of that, because a part of allyship is just taking responsibility for the parts of the situation that are within our control. And I think there are a lot of hashtags there, and hashtags are important. They do play a role, but so does calling your elected official. So does promoting elected officials who are going to change the status quo, the way that we're doing things. So many times when we say oppressed people may resist oppression, and by any means necessary, we only mean violence. But there are so many other ways that we need to be utilizing to resist oppression for ourselves and for other people. There are tools out there through economics, through the political system that exists right now, that we can take more control of if we engage with them more fully and do the things that we have to do to influence the situation in the way that we need it to be influenced. So calling elected officials, yes, keeping up with the hashtags and being vocal about what it is that you believe, but what are the practical steps that are going to change the lived reality for the people who are suffering right now that has to be considered. I do got to go. I love y'all. Thank you.
You too, brother.
You too, brother.
Hey, bro.
Right.
Yeah.
Dion.
I think that I just want to kind of point out, like, I mean, I always joke, but I'm extremely factual in how much I learned from Ernest speaking, and I hope the Wi-Fi not messing up. I'm trying, like I'm in Springfield,
good
until the end of the day, so I'm trying, but. I wanted to kind of point out, a few things that kind of fly into the face of what you said, Ernest. The first thing being understanding that, this system is empowered by our lack of understanding of scope and responsibility. You know what I mean? And so, you have to understand that the scope of the position, these political positions that we're electing people to, these things reverberate and keep in place things that are far more serious that they don't even know about. You know what I mean? Because it's been in place for so long. And so I don't think that all of the injustices are on purpose. All of this, some of it is by, lack of insight, lack of education, and lack of accountability at the most basic level. So when you said at the most basic level about, caring and loving, these are none of the things that this is built on here in America. You know what I mean? You can go days without loving someone or showing grace or care for someone and still make a lot of money, or you know what I mean, like and so as a result there's no onus on the person to have a basic decency or acceptance of what love can bring. And so as a result, if there's no reason to do it, if there's nothing in your life that forces you to say, okay, at the most basic level, I want someone to be free, we find ourselves in a situation where not only will they not care because it's far away, but they can, either directly or indirectly turn a blind eye to that same injustice that's happening in their backyard or front yard and never even address it in a way where they can ask themselves, okay, what am I doing wrong, or what can I do better? And so, it's us understanding, I think it's this collectivism for all of us around us accepting that we are more and we can do more. That's the four of us. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, we have to do this. And in that is where a lot of people who have been following us and who's been on this journey with us for the last couple of months is understanding, like, okay, well, no, we're going to say something, right? And we're going to open a dialogue, because at the most basic level for us, it's love, it's understanding, it's making space. And so, I totally agree, brother. And like, every time I talk to y'all, like, I'm learning, and I kind of go down that rabbit hole, because all of it's a rabbit hole at this point. It's so much stuff that is just suppressed and kept away from us, because once you learn, you can't unlearn. And I think that we're in that time now where at the most barbaric and violent and just crazy level possible, we're being confronted with things that we cannot ignore. And unfortunately, every fucking time, every couple of decades, we're met with an undeniable fact of violence that moves you to some type of position of like, okay, is this good? Is this bad? Is this a thing, or am I going to not call it a thing? And that's where we are now, where it's like, okay, that you like allyship and comfort and reciprocity is something. It is, you cannot be nothing anymore. And I think that when we think about, this crisis in Chicago, my position is, and I'm being very, very careful, is how I digest information and how I receive it and speak to it when no one is around. Because I think a lot of times what happens is that we're finding ourselves having the only conversation or the only thought in fucking public. And that is like, you know what I mean? Like, this thing is happening, and I'm faced with it because there's a police station across the street from my office. So, I'm going into our office with, I have a video on my phone, that my team sent me when they're clocking in, and all of our doors are covered with people sleeping by the door. And my team asking, what do we do? And me understanding, okay, I am not without responsibility. I am not without a choice. And so, saying, hey, can we get in, you know what I mean? But not waking them up because it's 4 a.m. And when we, giving the produce that we have in our office, giving them some, you know what I mean? And so it's like these things where these two things, whether, major in terms of scale and scope around the world or even local to our day-to-day activities, is just that very basic understanding and acceptance, like you said, Ernest, of, I believe in love, respect, and caring. And I know that I am not without fault. I am not without sin. I am not perfect. But, it means something to just trying to be the best version of myself possible. And that's how I am in everything right now. Is I just want to get something right, because of how how we're pre-exposed or disposed here as Black men, is Some of us can't be present. Some of us, to have 4 black men who can just have this conversation, it's such a fucking luxury these days. You know what I mean? And so, if I'm honored with this, then how I look at it is, to speak to what you said, Ernest, simply is like, no, the norm here in America and in Chicago is to not love, is to not have humanity. It is not the norm. And that is why, honestly, we stand out. That is why this thing that we've created feels special. Is because we've been lucky and blessed enough to have 4 black men who aren't the same, but like when it comes to our ethos and what we want to be remembered for, we want love to be a part of that. We want dialogue to be a part of that, and we want to be on the right side as opposed to the wrong side. And we understand that we don't dictate that. I think that's what we've seen is like we don't get to dictate our legacy. So we have to, okay, what are we doing this time? And I just think that in these 2 areas, if love and acceptance and equity and equality and all of these things mean something to you, it's not hard. It's not hard. It's not a hard thing to accept. And to know that I've never been the normal guy. I've never been, the blend in. I've never been just, stay quiet. You know what I mean? And so in these 2 areas, and, even with you all, I won't. And and that love that you spoke on is extremely important, but it's not common. It's not common. You can go days and weeks and months without leaning into love. You know what I mean? And that's a big problem that we're seeing play out on a grand scale right now.
Yeah,
Man, you said some stuff, bro.
yeah. I think one of the things, Dion, that you're pointing to that I think it might be helpful to give some clarity around is the challenge of the ecosystem of the ways in which activity happens and the timing point, right? I'm on the unsaid. Let me just be clear. I'm on the unsaid because of a felt experience of a lack of allyship, specifically with Black men that I felt in the social impact sector. And I wanted to be a part of a deliberate space where Black men's voices were being elevated and heard, and we could speak for ourselves. But that was because of, after spending 15 years in the social impact sector, standing up in solidarity, being with others, I looked around and I was like, I think that we are being conflated with white men. I think that the nuances of cisgender heterosexual Black men is being subsumed by an assumption that we're all going to be like Andrew Tate or passing around lists of places that we shouldn't take sisters on dates and all of it. Like, I was just like, it's just too much. It's too much. And I need to be in a space in partnership and brotherhood with specifically Black men, because I don't see allyship in my sector with us. And I'm going to need to be deliberate in making space for that. And that was why when Dion, when you called me up, I was hesitant because I was like, I ain't really got space time. I don't know if I can get another group. I can do another Instagram live. And then you was like, nah, but I think this gonna feed you, bro. And you were absolutely right. But I say that to say that we are using a digital medium to expand a conversation that is centering voices that some would call marginalized, some would call privileged, while talking about issues that directly affect us and also some that may indirectly impact others or us, right? Like we're using a digital medium. One of the things I learned when I started going upstream, when I say upstream, what I mean is, I used to do direct service work. I was working in the hood that I grew up in with young shorties, trying to keep young brothers out of jail, basically. And I was on the other side, I was raising money for them. And what I learned on the difference between doing programs versus raising money was how different these worlds are. When you're doing programs and you're dealing on the ground, you're breaking up fights in school classrooms. You're talking about eventually the school closures, the 50 school closures that happened in 2012, that then shut down 2 of the schools I was working in. Like, that is a very different way of showing up. Then on the other side with fundraising, I didn't have, like, the other people who were in my nonprofit, they weren't doing fundraising. I was. I was out in white neighborhoods in the far west suburbs, in these like deeply conservative Christian areas, trying to convince them of the problems that were happening in North Lawndale and Garfield Park and Austin and other predominantly black neighborhoods, and why they need to be involved. That was a totally different emotional disposition that I needed to have, going into those white spaces versus dealing in the black spaces, dealing with police in the black spaces and dealing with priests in the white spaces. Very different skill set, very different language, very different outcome. I went up a level and went into being a program officer. I was like, okay, I want to go manage the money that's going out on the streets. If I could get a job as a decision maker, then I can put more money in space so we ain't got to keep asking and begging, right? At the same time, you realize that boards of directors that are overseeing funding, I had a $4 million funding portfolio just for jobs programs and economic strategies. You realize the conversations at that room require a different type of longevity and discipline of language, right? The annual cycle of grant disbursements and decision making requires that you're not going to be activating every day, every week. You're going to have to bide your time, organize your forces, organize your arguments for that one day in the year where you get to defend your people. Now, all that time, somebody's me saying, look, you ain't doing nothing. You ain't doing nothing. You ain't doing nothing. How come you ain't at this? How come you ain't at that? And it's like, yo, do you understand what it takes? I got one day. I get one day this year. I get one day, and I got to put everything into that day. And I got to start to create relationships with all these power players so that when they get to the table, they don't see me as some other. They see me as someone who has the right to speak, but is also intelligent, not just articulate. I speak well and the truth. like I have to now go to these dinners and go to these galas and check in on these meetings in neighborhoods I'll never be able to afford to live in, right? Like it's a different work. I say all this to say that we must have an ecosystem focus when we're talking about allyship. We must understand that the work of the politician is very, very different from the work of the grassroots community organizer. And from one side to the other, as a person who's navigated a lot of these different spaces, we need more humility and grace to be extended to one another. We need it because the reality is I know some Black politicians that are trying hard to get more Black authors in the curriculum of a state board of education curriculum manual. They're trying their hardest. Are they tweeting about it? No, because if they start tweeting about every little thing, though their enemies are going to be attacking them when they go before their local legislature to put forward a bill. And they're like, well, you said this, that, these, and the third, because you were so active, we saw you. And so they have to keep their bullets hidden. They have to. And then at the same time, they're getting attacked by people who are like, well, you're not tweeting. You're not doing that. You're not doing these other things that I can do. You should be doing everything that can be done rather than the specific thing you're positioned to do that the rest of us can't. We have to have an ecosystem view on this. We have to have grace for one another. We have to be willing to understand that when I was, 12 years ago, when I was marching for Black Lives and I'm driving out to Ferguson, Missouri, driving gas masks out to the street and being like, what the heck is going on? Gas masks, police, guns, all of this. And I was shouting down older Black people because they're not showing up to the march. No awareness whatsoever for disability justice in my mind. They just didn't want to show up. No awareness whatsoever for the fact that some people have families and I'm only 20, early 20s. I ain't got no kids, I ain't got no family. And if you ain't showing up, it's because you don't want to. And we were all pointing our fingers. We were all pointing our fingers at older folks, not understanding that when you can build a Black family, you can help a Black community. But we didn't have no grace for that. They were allying in a way on a reproductive scale that I didn't even have vision for at the time. They were keeping house and home ready while I was out here talking about how we need to have the right to our own homes. We all are working togetherness. We got to have more grace with one another. We got to have, because I think we're creating enemies out of people who aren't able to partner in the way we are. And we're judging the way that they are partnering out of the ignorance we have about the collective struggle and the collective ways of engaging.
But I think, go ahead, Ernest. No, go ahead.
I was going. A couple of things I extracted from what y'all was saying is, for one, I think we're taught to have capitalist concern in this country. And capitalist concern is, of course, like, if you do this for me, I do this for you. You know what I'm saying? If you show you care for me, then I can show I care for you. It'd be like when I first started teaching, I would always remember, talking to kids and any issues they had with like other teachers or whatever. It's like, well, if they respect me, I'll respect them. Like,
Yeah,
well,
no,
who's going to
that's
initiate it? Who like who
somebody got
initiates
to
it
make the
first?
first
Then
move. Yeah.
somebody got it. If we all are that way, then there's never any respect, and we all hate each other. So like and I don't understand that we're taught that we don't understand the ways in which capitalism manifests within our community, because oftentimes we're trying to survive day in and day out, and that's not where we come from, but we've fitted it to our culture to survive, and it manifests in different ways. And again, going back to what I was taught growing up listening to hip hop, it's money over everything,
Right.
money over beat. You know what I'm saying? And like, so that I think that's what we have to learn. And also too, I don't think we understand the ways in which we're allies within our own community. Like Dion, I don't think you're suffering from food insecurity. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
like X, I don't know if you're suffering from, and not to say again, I know these things are intersectional, but like I don't the same ways in which you were when you were growing up.
Not at all.
The things you speak about. You know what I'm saying? The things that I'm speaking of and teaching about, not the things that I dealt with growing up still. But we're still like we're allies to that within our own community. Like when you went down on Ferguson, that didn't happen to you, your family member. You went to another community because you knew what could happen to you here. So we like I work with equity and transformation, man. Like I was never incarcerated, bro. I was never like caught up in the war on drugs. My neighborhood was a part of that. I understood how it still impacted me. You see what I'm saying? Like they're advocating for war on drugs reparations for people who are previously incarcerated, and when we get that, I'm not gonna get anything, and that's fine with me.
but that's
we're allies, bro. Steve.
Yeah, but I think and I just want to talk to the other side of what you all are saying too. You know what I mean? And it's funny because I think this relates to the conversation that me and X had when I was getting the band together. You know what I mean? And X like, listen, man, I'm just not with the social media. You know what I mean? And I appreciated it because he started with honesty, but also understanding that, we are victims to what mediums are available to teach us. And we don't choose that. I think that when we look at the things that people learn from, we fight it because we feel like it shouldn't be that. You know what I mean? As opposed to understanding that, along with that grace, on both sides, there has to be a really nice foundation of a mutual agreement on what are we starting from. And I think the issue there is not always, hey, you're not tweeting it, you're not with us. I think there's a missed opportunity there to teach. I think there's a missed opportunity of also teaching the other types of allyship. And this would not work if, using myself as an example, this would not work if I felt a type of way for not being as well versed in history as Ernest. But I did not take that as a bad. I looked at it and said, I can learn from him. And so what we also have to understand is that, we are innately good as a people until we are pre-exposed to evil. And so when I look at that, I look at everyone and I understand that they're not arguing or calling out or maiming or pointing a finger because they want to. They're doing it because no one is level setting on what information are we using as our basis to start this allyship from. And as a result, that person who is not tweeting is starting from a position that is vastly different and more well-informed than the people who are tweeting because that allyship is still necessary for the world that we live in. Unfortunately, we're just trying to keep the market share that we have because we're not allowed to even have market share in that either. And so I want to make sure that that same grace that we need for those who are allies and those who are fighting beyond the tweets and beyond the TikToks, we're also making space for those who have no other medium or don't see another medium, because it's so important for us to understand that love and respect and grace can be at the basis of a relationship until we figure everything else out. And I just want to make sure that when we talk about that, there's even when I listen to Ernest, I always listen. When I listen to you, X, when I listen to Jamal, I listen to learn first. And sometimes it's really hard telling yourself, hey, I don't know. You know what I mean? And also understanding that all of the things that you all speak about, for example, the dialogue that's going on in our comments right now, there's learning occurring. And it's so hard for, those of us who have not educated ourselves for one reason or another to create this dialogue where, we don't have the books and we don't have the historians. Not to say that we didn't have the same opportunity as you, but damn it, we didn't take them. And we're not wrong for not taking them, because that's where grace comes in too. And so it's always understanding that, the two-way grace that's needed is not just for those who are fighting. It's back from the fighters to those that you're fighting for. And you spoke right on that, X. You spoke about understanding, like, hey, listen, just as much as I'm empowered to fight, how dare I turn to those and say, why aren't you fighting with me when I don't know if they're fighting or not? You know what I mean? I think that like it's just always that the beautiful unknown, because all of us being here, especially as Black men, we've had to fight through something, and it's not talked about. It's not openly shared, but we know it's there. They've had that racist interaction. They've had those people that did not believe in him. They've had those jobs that they've gone for that they should have got that they didn't get. I always, think about when I go to Bryson's karate class, you know what I mean? Or I go, I see him at school and how angry I get when someone bullies him. And then I always zoom out and I say, well, I can't be beating up a 6-year-old kid, you know what I mean? And violence is not the answer. But also, I always see the other I see the other dads, walking their kids to school or saying have a great day. It doesn't matter, if you've read a lot of books in that moment. It doesn't matter if you're really fighting and you're an ally. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, in this moment, they're going through the same thing. They're just trying to figure this thing out, especially in an era where schools aren't as safe as we thought we would hope them to be. And so I just want to make sure that when we talk about grace and we talk about understanding, and when we talk about that ecosystem, that there's more responsibility if you've acknowledged it mentally that you need to be better. If someone is just bad and they don't know they bad, that's one thing. But the moment we can acknowledge mentally, like, man, I need to be better, then we have to make sure that our part that we play in that ecosystem looks damn good. Because I think the more we look in that mirror and look back at this foundation that we build and the part we play in that ecosystem, we realize we can be so much better. And that's just what this, that's what the unsaid is for me. It's us in that ecosystem and actually, not being comfortable. More another group, damn it. You know what I mean? Because we need more groups and more dialogue. You know what I mean? So that's kind of, like where I'm at with it.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, there's
I think there's.
Go ahead, E.
No, I just wanted to quickly add. I think there's also too what you're speaking to. There's a privilege of even having the time to be concerned about international affairs. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time, and if that's not the way that you are able to survive and provide for your family or community on a regular basis, it can be taxing. And sometimes, too, what I'm hearing from you, to me, it kind of feels like sometimes we can misinterpret someone communicating they don't concern with, they don't really even have the time, they feel like, to be concerned about something else other than what it means to just get to the next day.
I'll say time and health. That's what I said. The first thing I that checked me on the Ferguson stuff, and when I got back to Chicago and we were doing, the marches for Freddie Gray and the marches for Rakia Boyd and March. We had all the march. I was out. I mean, I was so backwards, man. I had just come out of 3 knee surgeries, bro, in one day. And I'm out there marching because I'm like, all right, if I'm not marching, I'm not real. Bro, I'm bleeding out at the knee on some crutches to show how down I am. That's the dumbest thing I can imagine. Like that's what, like that right there. Whoo. Like that you got to be clear when it's ego versus commitment. You got to be clear when it's ego versus commitment that's driving you to show up. You also got to be clear when it's care versus fear that's calling you in, right? And I think that the ways in which we show up for one another are really important. However, the need for us to show up for one another cannot excuse any of us from the responsibility to know that there is a time and a health that creates the possibility for solidarity. There's a time and a health. For me to say those things I said about folks not showing up, right? Like, it wasn't until I had a disability that I realized, like, yo, how would people feel weird? Like, and I'm mad at these folks because they're not, that's not right. That's not right. That don't make no sense, right? Like, that's not right. And then when I got older, I was like, man, having a job, full-time job, going into leadership, like having to manage employees, and you didn't send out 16 tweets in the last 48 hours, and now people mad at you, like, like people who they got the time, and obviously on the side, you got the privilege of time to be Twitter finger happy, like you 17 without a job, like, like you got the time to do it. That's not adulting, ages to say, like, you got the time. Right? We all got different, and there'll be a time, like, for instance, retirees, people who are older, they always be volunteering. How come these people don't show up to volunteer on Saturday morning? They got 2-year-olds. They got 4-year-olds. You ever tried to wake up an executive director at 8 a.m. on a Saturday on a nice summer day? A juice box and a t-shirt and the 2-year-olds? Like, that don't make no sense. They don't make no sense. We gotta have grace with one another. But here's the crux of it. We gotta also know when we ain't doing something, or when we running from doing something. And I think that's the thing we have to be specific about, where I say, hey, it's not about grace, it's about calling you out and in. Right? When you know people are showing up, for instance, to volunteer, they volunteer so that they never have to feel the risk of showing up at the march. People who tweet and never send in a witness slip and never go before their local congressman because they got some business deals on the line.
Even with the volunteers, like, because you just kind of, I don't think you said it. Let me just go back a little bit. All the volunteering and not financially contributing. Like, you got the money, you retired.
You got the money,
man. But you
nice
know what?
pension,
man. Listen, and so like you're absolutely right. But like we speed past that so much, because I fought against that when I started my organization. It was like, oh well, who you gonna get to donate food? I said, I'm buying it. I have to, because we've seen the system will not stabilize quality for us, so we have to buy this food. And so even when you speak to that, it's like, yeah, like, exactly, like, volunteer, never pay.
Yeah.
Retail leakage is the worst in Black communities. You could just you drive and spend gas money to take that dollar out the hood when you bought the same fucking gallon of milk, and you say, hey, well, I couldn't get everything that, well, you could have got fucking something.
Yeah,
but we don't.
And I can tell that this is close to the
we got Dion around.
Y'all know when I get it with that produce, man. Listen, when that produce conversation. But again, when we talk about these things, what you're speaking about.
When we talk about these things, the bottom teeth anger.
I hate y'all.
When you go underbite, when you go full underbite, that's the voice of leadership right there.
You took him back to a specific moment on his journey.
But it's the thing of taking inventory of what we have and saying, okay, what are we gonna do now? And that's the thing. It's like, no, I'm not asking you what can't you do. I'm not asking you about what you don't have. I'm saying, what the fuck do you have now? What can you do now?
But Dion,
okay, cool.
People don't ask that. You understand that people like a lot of people don't ask the question you just said. What in this moment, a call for allyship, people are saying, why won't you do this? Versus, what do you have to give?
But we feel
Jake gonna have to add TVMA to this section. If you made it this far, Jake, make sure you add. I don't know about PG-13.
Mature audiences
TVMA.
I've been trying to keep it clean. Dion just happened.
No, if you make it past 1 hour and watching this, put the kids up.
but listen, man, I think that is I'm proud of us, because we can say it because most people don't. And that's the thing. Like, it starts with us. It starts with us. 4 highly influential black men in the Chicago metropolitan area asking, no, what do you have? What can you do? And us knowing that and standing on that and saying we're not wrong for asking that. You know what I mean? Because we are the unifiers. We're combining those who are fighting behind closed doors, and then those who can attend the march, and those who can tweet it out, so that there is an understanding, there is some type of network, there is that ecosystem where one is cognizant of the other, and now we can deploy that strategy.
Yeah.
Because when we lose strategy, we really lose at the bigger thing that's like in place right now. There's multi-tier strategy that is pitting us against each other, that is keeping us down, that is keeping the same toxic systems in place. So we're gonna need strategy, and it's not to say we have to have that now, but it's to say, no, you know what? We're gonna build on everything, and that's what the fuck the Unsaid is. It's building on every episode, on every conversation, on every dialogue, on holding us accountable, and so that then we can then ask, what can you do?
Yeah, I think that's the grace in it.
Yeah. On that
I know.
note,
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
I don't know how much longer y'all plan on saying.
Yeah,
no,
we about to close this one out for the day, y'all. Boy, the way
that's the one right there. He said that's what the Unsaid is about. Damn it.
Darn it.
Cue audience applause.
Well, look, I think, we've been here trying to chop up this question of allyship in this moment and the way in which we can show up. Some of the things, just to summarize, that's been made clear to me in our conversation is the importance of knowing that there is something you can do. To Dion's question, right? What can you do? It presupposes the idea of capacity. It presupposes and relies on the notion of abundance. What can you do? Secondly, from that is the grace to know that we must hold people accountable for what they can do and not demand that they do what we do. We must be able to be flexible enough to know that people are entering into moments of social struggle at different points, not only in the arc of the struggle, but in the arc of their very lives. We cannot hold new parents accountable for not showing up on the hours when people without kids show up. We cannot hold elders responsible for moving quickly through the streets in the march when they don't have the bodies to do so. We must be aware of the ways in which our grace and compassion must walk hand in hand with our demands and our solidarity. That is absolutely necessary to the continuity of community. And I feel that in this moment, we are destroying community. And I say that because people are breaking ranks. People who have been arm in arm for years, our bonds are being tested right now, particularly around this question of what is happening in Palestine. They're being tested right now. And I'm watching decades of solidarity and work together being broken apart in this moment. And it's not just because of the question of the issue of Palestine. It's not just the question of the issue of solidarity with Israelis or Palestinians or Black Palestinians or white Israelis or these and otherwise and yada, yada, yada. It's not just that. It's the tactics of the lack of compassion that we're extending to one another as the ecosystem of justice work is being diluted and distorted. And in favor of that, we're being asked and demanded to do what everyone else does, and that person is the judge and the arbiter and the jury of whether your work is sufficient enough for our fight. And that's not right, it's not productive, and it certainly isn't real allyship. That's why I said we have to understand when it's the difference between our ego and our solidarity that is compelling us to do something. Our ego needs to get out of it. And we need to understand that solidarity not only has its time, it has and operates within time. And be loved to one another. That's it. Close us out, Dion. The Unsaid
you've watched another episode of The Unsaid with Jamal Kennan, Ernest Krim, and Xavier Ramey. I'm the 4th ranked host, Dion Dawson. Please, when you can, please follow everyone, all four of us, as well as the Unsaid on all platforms. Please go to YouTube, subscribe, cut the alert show on. This episode will be dropping in a couple of days. Please tell someone you love them. Be the best version of yourself possible. And just remember, the people who you're with and those that are with you might not always be the same. Let's try to get those circles to kind of overlap each other. With that being said, you guys have a great day. And, come back next time for some more conversation.
All right, check us out on YouTube. All the full episodes are out there on YouTube. Follow everybody here: Dion Dawson, Ernest Krim, Jamal Cannon, myself. Follow our original pages and also the Unsaid Chicago. Hoping to bring more voices and elevating more nuance from Black men throughout the social impact sphere.
Hit
Absolutely.
us up for a sponsor too. You know what I'm saying? We up there now. We got a bunch of followers.
Yeah.
Peace.
We definitely can do commercials.
Peace, y'all.
All right, guys.
Peace.